Hello and welcome to Europa Universalis 4. I am Lord Forwind here with another country guide. This time I have decided on Bavaria. So Bavaria is one of the more unique countries sort of in the HRE. They are definitely a large starting country with 58 development. Not quite as large as Austria and Bohemia, but larger than the others in the HRE. Obviously slight exceptions, like Milan is pretty large as well. They do not have, despite being a fairly historically important nation, they do not have any unique achievements, which is disappointing. But they do have some really nice ideas, although they are, I'd say, second-tier ideas. They're better than your average ideas, but they're not as great as the others. I'm just going to quickly run through them because it'll move right into the next stuff. Cavalry combat ability, plus 10. Obviously, better early on than later, but still strong overall. Chance of new air, plus 50%. This is a really good ability, especially if you're in the HRE and you want to play like a diplomatic union game, because it means you're always going to have pretty much an air. Most countries like Saxony and stuff get that midway, and Austria midway through their idea trees. Institute the Everlasting Succession, plus 1 yearly legitimacy, also very nice. Between these two, 50% air and clear legitimacy, you should probably never really have any issues with inheritance. Plus 10 production efficiency, bring in the Bavarian purity law. Then the next one, also going along the theme of stability and heirs, found the Bavarian State Orchestra, plus 1 yearly prestige. Combine all three of those ideas and you should be able to disinherit, fire, and get new heirs like nobody's business. Then you've got establish the Geislerat, probably said that wrong, plus 1 yearly papal influence, which of course will incentivize you to stay Catholic. Plus 3 missionary strength versus heretics, also very useful in the HRE if you stay Catholic, because it means any Protestant lands you take, you'll be able to convert back. Plus 10 tax modifier, become the Brewmaster General. Found a professional army, plus 5% discipline. Found the Royal Order of St. George for the defense of the Immaculate Conception. Wow. Negative 10 stability cost modifier. Not awesome name, slightly minor bonus. Also, again, another one to ensure stability. And then finally, one of their best ones, negative 10 development cost. Now, that doesn't sound like much, negative 10% development cost, but it is. When you look at the land that Bavaria consists of, they have lots of farmland. 4 of their 5 starting territories are farmland. The land right around them is either farmlands or, well, a couple more farmlands and then some grasslands. Of course, there are mountains nearby, but I have actually seen in my most recent Let's Play as Venice into Italy, into Revolutionary Italy, into Rome, into Revolutionary Rome. Actually, no, not Rome into Revolutionary Rome. Whatever, into Revolutionary Rome. That a Bavaria that has just conquered this region, no more, could field an army of like 130,000. So pretty impressive, 130 regiments just from this land. Of course, the benefit of farmland is it's cheaper to develop. If you have the ability to do edicts, you put another development one on it, and then you've got 15. You get the finishing idea or ambition from the Bavarian ideas, so that's 25. And then if you go and complete economic ideas, which will give you another 20, you're looking at 45% cheaper land development. It is one of the nations that I'm finding is very viable to play extraordinarily tall. Other exceptions, of course, are some of the Italian lands like Milan. Which means you don't have to expand that much, which is good because you're in the HRE and expanding is difficult. The odds of you actually stealing the emperorship away from Austria is low. It can be done. You can play a half-decent diplomatic game. But let's just run through a few other things before I get into the full strategy. First off, they do have some unique missions at this time. They have claiming Oberpfalz, which is this province. It's owned by the Palatinate, which works very well for you. And once you take it, you can get an event that'll give you a claim on the whole lower Swabian area, which is an area, not state. Let's track that down. Oh, I guess that just is it, Lower Swabia in general. Yeah, Lower Swabia. So it'll give you claims in this area, which is good because that means you can expand to that region. Didn't know that. Then if you conquer that, which obviously, oh, I should have just looked further. If you conquer that, it will give you a claim in the Platinate area, which is through here. Nice amount of land. And once you get that, you'll get the achievement Uniting the Whittle Botches, which if you conquer the Platinate land, it will give you a claim on the Franconian land, which is up here. Then once you conquer that, it will give you a Bavarian ambition, +1 yearly prestige, 100 admin power, and 30% improved relations for 20 years. Not the best stuff, but pretty solid. You've also got the Imperial ambition standard stuff, so diplomats, relations, etc. Oddly enough, it's not showing what Imperial Unity does. I believe it's Imperial Authority gain. Slight bug there. So essentially, Bavaria's missions are to expand out here, which they do a half decent amount of time. They don't have the strongest early game, seeing as their land is not the most developed. It's in the HRE. It's pretty good. I mean, it's very easy to develop into a rather tall nation. But once they survive the mid-game, Bavaria becomes quite the little powerhouse, especially if they stay Catholic. Everyone else goes Protestant. Because that lovely +1 yearly papal influence, if you go religious and stack it with the +2, you're going to be getting +3 papal influence. So you should be able to either control the papacy or at least get tons of bonuses from it. So that's a very viable mid to late game strategy, then take out Protestants. But in terms of beginning, now it's important to realize that you have four free cities sitting right on your border, and then you've got two theocracies, and then you've got the Palatinate and Ansbach. Obviously, I'm going to ignore by and large Austria and Bavaria, Bohemia, because the odds of you expanding into them early game are slim to none. Unless Austria loses the emperorship, you're not going to be able to beat them in a war for ages. And Bohemia is very powerful early on with Podebrand. They'll get a huge tech lead, be very powerful, and they tend to hate you. If you can get a royal marriage and sometimes an alliance with Austria, that's actually a pretty good strategy. Historically, lots of rivalries between these countries, but if you can get like an alliance with them, that will protect your entire eastern flank. Plus, if Austria is emperor, you can expand a lot more without the usually terrible imperial authority issues. So for rivals, you actually have a pretty easy starting rivalry. One of the ones you must rival is the Palatinate, and I'll get into that in a minute. But usually rivaling Bohemia, especially if Austria is rivaling them, is good. And rivaling Augsburg or Salzburg are also good, here and here respectively. Your early expansion should be into these two territories. I recommend you either take and vassalize Salzburg, because 16 development, small nation, they can field about 5 troops for your armies, which early game is good. Or you can take it because it's 16 developments, and it's part of your Upper Bavaria state. So I personally would lean towards taking it for yourself, but some people say that having tons of vassals early on is better. It's really up to you. If you want the more troops, vassalize it. If you want the development, take it for yourself. Augsburg is the next target. They don't tend to get tons of allies, Salzburg and Augsburg. They may join trade leagues like Venice and Genoa, but if you wait long enough, they'll collapse. And seizing those is good, another 18. So you can pretty much pick up almost a little over 30, 34 development very rapidly as this country, if you're lucky. That'll put you around 90 development and make you quite the little powerhouse in the HRE. And pretty much everyone west of you, you can take out in a war because you've got more troops. You start out with a force limit of 11, let alone expanding. It's really powerful. Of course, the Imperial aggressive expansion issue will be your biggest problem in the HRE. Outside of that, if you can, you want to take out the Palatinate's lands. This might be one of the ones you have to wait for a while on, usually because the Palatinate allies Austria, I found historically. However, if you're lucky, you will notice they have the same dynasty as you, the Wittelsbach. I'm probably saying that wrong, so my apologies. Denmark also has the same dynasty, which is rather interesting. If you got extraordinarily lucky, this guy could die. If you had enough prestige and power, you could take their throne. However, their starting ruler is neutral towards you and infertile and distance between borders. So you're not going to get a royal marriage with them. The Platinate almost invariably hates you, from what I've seen. I don't think I've seen a game where they've actually liked Bavaria. But it does mean that if you're lucky, they don't have an heir, and if you can sneak a royal marriage in there, or they just dynasty dies out, you've got a pretty good chance of claiming their throne and forcing a personal union on them, which should be pretty easy to do. They're not what you'd call the most military powerful nation. Plus you start out with that cavalry bonus, which you'd be surprised how good it is early on. It does incentivize you to build like another cavalry unit or two. Just be aware you don't want to get too far over the 50% cavalry insufficient support. Otherwise you're going to lose more and more troops, but cavalry helps a lot. You want to definitely avoid expanding into the free cities, unless of course they lose their free city status, rebel, and go independent, or if you're really lucky, somebody disbands the HRE, which could be you, to be honest. You just have to occupy everyone's lands. It's much easier to become emperor, revoke them that way, and expand. The odds of you actually forming the HRE in Bavaria are low, but better than your average HRE country, seeing as you start with fairly good development. If you look at the electors, I mean, you get some pretty good support. If you grow a little bit, you get the large nation, the HRE bonus, which puts you a lot closer, you'd think, than you would think towards the imperial throne. Your starting ruler is not so great, 6. Your heir is terrible, so I would disinherit him as soon as you can. You do get a 50% chance of new heir, which is wonderful. If you die, though, you have a chance of a succession war between Denmark and Bohemia, so be a little bit careful of that. And other than that, in terms of ideas, now, if you've watched any of my other guide videos, you'll know the first idea group I always advocate for is defensive. I'm probably going to still do that here. Defensive is just ridiculously powerful in terms of early game, mid game, and to some degree late game wars. If you can't match them in morale, you can't win the war pretty much, unless you have insane discipline. But there is a few other options. You could make an argument to take influence ideas as them. If you're going to try and play a bit of a diplomatic game, vassalize these guys near you. Get 3 vassals, then annex them later. Income from vassals is nice. The yearly prestige and chance of new heir pretty much means you can disinherit heirs like crazy. Always get at least 7, 8, or above heir. Obviously, there's still a chance that it fails, but it's a lot lower. But I would honestly argue for defensive first, then probably either influence or diplomatic, depending if you want to have vassals or try and become HRE emperor. For your third idea, I would recommend economic ideas. You could take it earlier, but it's not going to be the most useful thing. Once you get 3 idea groups, you can fill it up. Fill this all up. And then you can get the 10% development efficiency. Around the same time, you get the 20 development efficiency. And at that point, you can just play absurdly tall. Probably for your fourth idea, something I don't usually advocate, you could take quantity ideas. Now, again, subjective whether or not your economy can support it, but you'll be able to have a much larger army for a small nation, and it'll become very powerful. Bavaria can field tons of troops off their lands, especially if you build tall. After that, it's kind of up to you and how the game's going. Religious might be useful as your third or fourth idea group, depending on what you want to do. And also if you're still struggling to convert back the HRE, although you shouldn't be with that lovely +3 missionary strength versus heretics. But if you want to double down into it and get more papal influence, again, an option. From what I can tell, the papal influence bonus does not translate to church power like some other ideas do, where you get church power from Protestantism. So by and large, stay as Catholic unless you have some strange reason to want to go Protestant. Humanist, not too useful. Admin, if you're going to be expanding a lot, is useful. If you can somehow sneak your way around the free cities and get to Switzerland, Italy is, of course, an option for expansion. If you kind of head towards it rather quickly, you can seize a lot of it before Austria and France start moving in on it. You should never take the colonial ideas of expansion and exploration. There's no real bonus for you. Same thing with maritime and naval. You're a land power, not an ocean power. You could become one, but it's not worth it. Aristocratic idea, I wouldn't recommend. Offensive, of course, always good mid to late game. Defensive, almost a necessity. Quality is good, but it has a couple naval ideas that you won't get the full benefit from. But it does give really good military ideas. So maybe late game, take it. Trade ideas, not the most useful. Sadly, trade is not one of your strongest things. You're part of the N trade node. You do have a level 2 center of trade, and you get a half decent amount of money from it. But unless you're going to go conquer Austria and then Hungary, you're not going to ever get a ton of money. You'd almost be better moving into the Rhineland and then steering trade towards that if that's your goal. Not that I would recommend you try and do that. Espionage currently is useless. It's going to get better later on. Innovative, you could take innovative if you want to try and play a small, tall nation, because the tech costs will give you more monarch points to develop with, but the other bonuses are not the most useful for you. You're not going to really have tons of trouble with inflation. War exhaustion you should be able to handle anyway, and I don't think you'll be using too many mercenaries. But with the prestige, you'll have insane levels of prestige, of course. So that's all of the idea groups. So again, just a quick summary. Try to take out Salzburg or Augsburg. Ansbach is really weak early on, and if you can take them out, it's usually worth it. You don't get a claim on them until after you take this province, but you can easily create a claim and take them out. 7 more development, not the biggest, but it does give you options to expand to Württemberg, actually into the Palatinate land, Mainz, Würzburg's land. So it does give you more routes for expansion than taking this one. Just be wary that Bohemia tends to like to take this province, and it's tricky to do so. And trying to make peace with Austria or else plot their demise. You got to be really lucky, either steal the emperorship, have them lose it, then you can go after them. You're going to have to wait at least till 1500 really to take out Bohemia. Podebrand's going to give them such a lead. And you're going to have to get larger. You just can't match the sheer development that Austria and Bohemia have early game without playing very tall for a long time. So again, a bit more of a play tall nation than play wide. Obviously that's always a thing in the HRE, but Bavaria takes it to a slightly new limit by literally having the best land in the HRE for development. Right here. Everywhere else has woods or highlands. Bohemia is the closest one being useful again. And obviously I'm not counting the Danish miners because right now they're not in the HRE. So that's pretty much it. You can become quite the powerhouse mid to late game, weak early game. I would advise you to play tall. You can of course still play wide. They're a pretty versatile nation. Shouldn't have to worry about inheritance or personal unions that much with them. Just remember you have your dynasty on 2 other thrones at the beginning, so plan accordingly. And that's pretty much it. That's my summary of Bavaria, one of the first nations I actually played a full game on. Actually, it might have been the first or close to it. So, hope you enjoyed it. If you guys have any other recommendations, like any other clever little strategies, put them in. I'll comment on them and like them. And if you've watched this far, please subscribe, check out the other ones, and like this video. Bye for now.